Today, you're going to get very fancy with your checkboxes, and this is all done with the help of SVG. Hey everybody, what's up? Gary Simon here. So today we're going to check out how to create custom SVG-based animated checkboxes. All right, so first we're going to hop into Adobe Illustrator where we're going to quickly create the SVG graphic for this effect. And then we'll hop into Visual Studio Code to write out the HTML and the CSS necessary to make this all work. We'll also use a tiny bit of JavaScript to create the toggle effect here, where it reverses the animation as seen here. Now, it will also be accessible in that we will use the Chromevox extension which basically people who use screen readers. This allows us developers to see if your user interface elements are actually accessible, and we'll find out at the end that it actually is, and I'll show you how all that works. So as always, make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and let's get started. Before we begin, Linode makes it easy and affordable to host your website, your portfolio, your online store, and more on whatever technology stack you use. Getting up and running is fast and easy with one-click app installs like WordPress and Drupal. With back-end access to your server, customization and scaling options are all but limitless. If you just need something small like an online portfolio to showcase your work, Linode has you covered. If you need to manage tons of clients' websites and reliably serve them to millions of visitors, Linode can do that too. So sign up using the link below in the description to get $20 in credit on your new Linode account. All right, so I am here in Adobe Illustrator. You can use whatever vector-based drawing application that allows you to export or save SVG code as you wish. All right, so again, this is going to be ultra simple, so you can use any app you want, really. So I have a create new dialog, new document window open here, and I'm just going to make the width 100 pixels by 100 pixels. It doesn't really matter because we're dealing in SVG, which can scale to any size, really. So here we are zoomed up big on this square, and for a checkbox, it makes most sense to stick to the checkbox pattern, or in other words, what people expect. A checkbox is usually square. You can have rounded corners on it, but I wouldn't put it at a circle because people associate that with radio buttons. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get out our square. Come out right here in the center with our guides, that little pink guide you see. Right there's the center. Hit Alt, drag up, and I'd say right around there is good. Actually, no. Let's do that again. Hit Alt and Shift to drag up to make sure that you actually have a square. There we go. All right, so what's cool is like right now we don't even have to specify a actual border because the stroke rather is something that we can control and will control in the CSS code. But just to get an idea of what we want it to look like, we'll go ahead and put a stroke on it. So window, we're going to go out our properties. Oh, they're on the other monitor. There they are. And we can see the stroke is at 2. We'll just put 3. That's fine. And we also want to adjust the border radius, but I can't do that for some reason. Even though I'm hovering over this little circular emblem for the border radius, it just wants to rotate. It's a big pain in the butt. But we just click this more options in the properties dialog, and we'll see right here we can increase. We'll go around 7 pixels or so for that. All right, so that's looking good. Next, what we want to do is we want to make sure there's no fill in it. And again, that's something that we can control with the CSS property too. Just trying to get it to be as specific as we can. So now I'm going to take the pen tool, the dreaded pen tool. Although it's so simple, we're just creating literally 3 anchor points to create a check. All right, so I'm just going to start here. Hold Shift for a 45-degree angle. So when you hold Shift, you can go 45, 90, 180, whatever. So now Shift right here, and then keep on holding Shift, and then maybe right around there. And I'm going to hit Escape here. Take our Move tool. Get this positioned up to roughly around where we want it. So we could see if we select it, it has a 3-point stroke, just as this does as well. And there you go. That's looking pretty decent in my opinion. You may have to adjust your stroke more so or whatever, but as long as this works pretty, as it looks pretty close to mine, you'll be good to go. So you can experiment with the stroke the actual width of it, but mine, I think 5 is pretty good. And when it comes to this sort of thing, you want to scale it down to see how it responds. Although if we go to our transform option, scale strokes, there we go. You see how much it looks. But here, unfortunately, it's also scale corners. You want to do that as well. There we go. Now we can check it to see how this looks at small sizes. And you always want to do that for your designs. So let's go ahead and we'll go to File. We'll go to Save As. All right. Let me put it in the actual folder that we're going to work in. I created a folder in my code folder. You guys can do that soon or now. And here's the thing. We can save it, but we don't necessarily even have to save this as a file. Let me tell you why. Let's first choose SVG. We're going to hit Save. I'm just naming it Untitled 2 or whatever the default document name is. What we could do is just go to SVG Code here in Illustrator. And that'll just give us the code. So we don't even have to save it as a file. And so here's all the code. I'm just going to choose from SVG down. So the opening SVG tag all the way down to this SVG tag. And of course, we're going to get rid of a lot of that stuff. But now we can go ahead and close this out. We'll get out my code editor, which is Visual Studio Code. So you can see it's completely blank. There's no files in here. So let's create our basic files as normal. CSS folder with a Sass file. If you're gonna use Sass for this, you can make sure you use the Sass, the live Sass compiler. Go to your plugins right here, and then just live Sass compiler. And I'm also going to use the live server option. So make sure those two are installed. All right, and then we're going to go to index. We're going to use Emmet abbreviation ! And then hit enter, and that gets our quick HTML boilerplate going. Link, no, wrong position, Gary. Link, enter, CSS folder, main.css file. So that CSS file doesn't exist yet because we have to click back here and choose, after you install that live Sass compilation extension, watch Sass right here. Okay, so if you don't know what Sass is, of course, I do have a Sass tutorial on my crash course rather on my channel. Just do a channel search for that. All right, so here we are in the index.html, and now we're ready to rock. So first thing I'm going to do is just give it a class. Let me increase this just a bit. Control B gets rid of that sidebar. We're going to give this a class of inner, just a div. And I am using Emmet abbreviation, so instead of me sitting here typing div class equals all this crap, it's just like annoying. I'm using Emmet, which is a way here within Visual Studio Code to create HTML elements just like this. So this is a class. I have a course for that as well. Do a channel search for how to use that. Okay, so div class inner, and this is just going to allow us to control the position of the entire thing. And so now we're going to actually get to the purpose of this tutorial, which is the input element. All right, so input. And when it comes to checkboxes, you put the input first and then the label usually. Sometimes you could wrap the whole thing in a label. It doesn't really matter. Input type is not a check. In fact, we're going to do input and choose checkbox. There we go. And the name for this input is going to be CB, as in checkbox. I don't know. I'm not very original. And then the ID as well. Next up, we're going to have our label. All right, the label for is always in relation to form elements to the ID of the form element the label is referring to. So CB. All right, we're going to open that label up. And this is where we put in our SVG. All right, so what we'll do is I'm going to paste all of that crap that we had. First, we don't need the style option right here. We don't need a lot of this stuff. So version, ID, XMLMS, all these tags. We don't even need this. We'll just keep our view box. Our style, we don't need that either. Boy, they really love adding a ton of tags here. All right, so get out of there. We don't even need the groups either. We just have really two elements inside of our SVG element. So let's get this all tabbed up correctly. We have our path there. And then we also have our polyline. All right, let's take our SVG closing tag, get that where it needs to be. And there we go. So let's adjust some of these classes. I'm going to add a class to the path, and we're going to call it box. And this is the actual box. The polyline here is the checkbox. So that class, we're going to give it check. Oh, damn. I'm putting my hand in the wrong space all the time. All right. So that's good to go. I also want to have an actual label so that it shows up next to the side of the checkbox. So we're going to have, I'm going to wrap it in a span though, which will allow us to control the position of the label in relation to the checkbox. So show notes. Again, this is for my guitar app thing, so this is going to be like a toggle thing for my for showing notes on a fretboard or whatever. So that's our label here. And let's go to save this. At this point, Control B, right click, and we're going to open with live server. So get that extension installed, restart. You'll have that option. Let's close these. And of course, everything's going to look really broken up right here, big time, because I removed that CSS, the style CSS that was inside the SVG, which got rid of the fill, but right here by default, when you do that, it does give it a default fill. So it's looking all messed up. We can see up here, we can see our checkbox. So don't worry, we'll be able to adjust this and make it look much better in a second. Right now I'm gonna pause just so that I can get this situated so you can see the code while or the preview here while I code. All right, so let's go ahead and rock. So Control B, get rid of that sidebar. We'll go to our main Sass. So I'm just gonna paste into initial rule sets so you don't have to see me sit here type all this. There is gonna be a Codepen link in the description so you can see all the CSS anyhow. So first, just resetting everything to box sizing, border box. Also the body, again, very simple stuff. Setting the height to 100. Display grid, place content center. That's in relation to this class right here. That's going to position everything in the center. As you can see, once I save it, we'll see what it does. Also, we have place content background, set it to this light gray, just for that new Morphic Effect, neomorphism or whatever. And then font family, blah, blah, blah. Nothing exciting. So next, we are going to specify our inner selector. All right, so inner, Jesus, Gary, come on, type. So padding 5.5 EM rather. We're going to say border radius 0.3 EM. And again, we're not really seeing much right here right now. Width of 200 pixels. We'll have a box shadow. And this is just to this overall parent container right here. I wanted to do the new Morphic Effect, so I'm going to paste in just a couple values right here. So that gives us that little, you could barely just see it, but it's that, you know, that trendy new little thing going on. All right, so now we're going to specify the important part, the checkbox. We don't want to see that checkbox, right? That's the one that we want to hide. So we're going to say input type equals checkbox. That's how we select that. And we're going to say opacity 0. All right. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to say display none. There's two different ways to do it, through opacity 0 and display none. I'm going to choose display none. I was experimenting with both. That's why they were sitting there on my reference monitor. We're going to do pointer events on this is going to be none, because we don't want pointer events on that anyways. Although if it's display none, that doesn't even matter. Also, we're going to say we're going to access our label. So here's where we're going to set cursor pointer. All right, because it's the label, it has the SVG inside of it, so we want to change this to cursor pointer. We're also going to say font size 0.8 EM. This is in reference to that show notes caption down there. We're going to display grid. And I tried to do this with Flexbox, but I couldn't get it to work. But I need the show notes to float left to the actual SVG element, our checkbox, our custom checkbox. So grid template columns, auto 3FR is what worked for me. And then of course it hides, but don't worry, we'll make it come back. And then we're going to reference our SVG, which is inside of the label. See, we can see right here, we have our label and our SVG element. So the SVG element, we're going to say stroke. First, we're going to put width. All right, 2em. There we go. And then we're going to say stroke, RGB 0, 124, 226. It's kind of just a nice blue. All right. Again, we're not still not seeing it correctly. Stroke width 5, if you recall that. And fill is going to be white. All right. So let's continue on. It's not looking correct completely, and it doesn't function obviously just yet, but we're going to get there. We're going to reference the box, which is the class we've applied onto this, which is the actual outer part. So the box, we're going to say stroke dash array and 320. If we save it, nothing's going to happen because by default we want to see the whole container of the box, the whole stroke rather. So stroke dash offset 0. All right. You may have to experiment with these, and you'll see what I mean once we get to the animation part. So you're probably wondering, you know, how did it come up with 320? But you'll see. Check. I might as well just copy these two real quick. This is the actual checkbox class right here on the polyline. Could just reference to polyline selector, but you know, whatever. This one, we're just going to say 70, and then we get rid of it by saying the dash offset is 70. There you go. Now, of course, it still doesn't work, and that's okay. And I still do see a fill in that check. Oh, so yeah, fill, none. There we go. So if we set this to like, for instance, 30, we'll see just half of it. 0. There we go. Same thing with this. If we go to 320, it hides it. All right. Okay, so fill, let's make that white. Is it changing it to white? I can't really tell. Well, we'll find out. My code right now is not really matching up with the code on my reference monitor, so we'll have to do a little bit of figuring things out here, which is no big deal. All right, so next up, I do have one more selector, which is our span inside of this area. And the span's in relation to this text. And we just need to get that padding top, something like 0.3 em, and then margin left will be like 0.3 em. All right, and that's looking better. Okay, so now the fun part happens, or come just inside here, and this is our inner class, I believe, closing bracket, is we say and checked plus label. All right, so when the input is checked, all right, yeah, there we go. When it's checked, then we're going to say for the label, box, fill, white. Oh, okay, I was doing that there. I think we're going to take that off. Stroke dash offset is going to be 320, which remember hides it. And we're going to transition it for the animation. So we'll say stroke dash offset 0.3 seconds linear. Look at that. It's actually animating different than I thought it would, and it's different than my reference. That's no big deal. We'll figure that out though. And then we'll take this, because we want to animate the check as well. So this is going to be 0, because remember it's at 70 before, because we're revealing it. And then for transition, we'll say stroke dash offset 3 seconds linear. That's fine. And this has to be changed to check, of course. And oh yeah, that's because up here in this dash offset, that was supposed to be 70. So it hides it by default when it's not checked, because it's not checked by default, the input button. So then we set this from 70 to 0 here, save it. There we go. Okay, so right now there's a couple things I want to make sure that's happening correctly. Is it's filling white by default in the background. So let me do that. So I discovered one issue, and it dealt with For some reason, we can see that these were the outer box is thicker than the actual check marks, and that the checkbox, and that's not supposed to happen, the check mark. And also I couldn't get it to fill white, and you still see this border around it. So I dug around, and basically Illustrator, for this element, notice how the stroke is inside, it's inset basically. If we go over here to the properties, we change this align stroke to center, then you can go to save as, then you can save it as an SVG, save, and then view the code, and that actually changes the code in the D property of the path element here. So we just copy that property, the D attribute value, replace this with that, and it is different. We save it, and then all of a sudden that code that we had now works like it's supposed to. Now, one thing I thought would be cool is we use a little bit of JavaScript just to toggle a class so that we can reverse the animation. So when somebody clicks this, it just doesn't go back to that square. It'll animate in a reverse fashion. So let's do that real quickly. So again, we're just going to do inline JavaScript. So that here at the bottom of the document script, and we're going to say let checkbox equals document.get element by ID. And we'll say CB is that ID. Shift Alt down arrow key. And then we're going to say the SVG element. We'll call that checkbox because the SVG element is a checkbox. All right, kind of confusing naming conventions there. So then we're going to say SVG, when somebody clicks on it, because that's what they're clicking on, add event listener of click. And then we create an arrow function, and inside of here, when somebody clicks it, we'll say if checkbox.checked, which is how in vanilla regular JavaScript you check if a checkbox is checked. Then we'll say svg.classList.add reverse. So we're going to add a reverse class onto the SVG element, or this element right here. So then we'll say else. We'll just flip this basically. Just change add method to remove. All right. Now it's not going to work yet because we haven't defined the reverse class. So let's go ahead and do that. So our reverse class will come out here to the very bottom, and we'll say reverse box. And basically we just reverse these elements up here. So the box is going to be 0, and then we'll do the other one, which is check, and that's going to be 70, I believe. So let's see if that worked. No, of course it didn't, because then life would just be too easy. So let's see what's happening here. Control-Shift-I. Cannot read property add event listener of null. Yep, and that's right. The problem's right here. I need to add a ID of checkbox. There we go. There we go. So let's close that. Bring this back over here. There we go. Look how cool that is. Now, if you were to have multiple checkboxes right here, the design would start to look quite inconsistent. In fact, let me try something. Let's just replicate this code. We have to change the checkbox, we'll change these IDs here. There we go. So they're both styled the same right now, which is great, but if you click on one of them, then it kind of looks strange, doesn't it? It throws off the flow of the design. So really what I would do in this case is I wouldn't animate the actual box. I would just keep it with the check. So to show you what I mean, there we go. It's much more simple. It's not quite as cool looking, but still, I think it would be a much better pattern, design pattern for keeping consistency in your UI design. But still, I wanted to show you just how to do it in a slightly more elaborate approach. Now, what you could do is set up a keyframe. If you like that sort of animation on the border, set up a keyframe where you have 0% to 50% and 100%, where at 0%, it's just this, 50%, it would take this dash offset property and change it so that it hides it, and then at 100% it would bring it back. So it would be like a kind of like a quick, cool sort of looking looping, but the border would ultimately come back. Anyhow, it's just an idea. So let's check out whether or not this is actually accessible to those who are reading using screen readers. So if you go to the Chromevox, just go to Google Chrome extensions, and we search for, what is this called again? Chromevox. Yes, Chromevox. All right, you can add the extension. I already have it installed. It's right here. So install that. And it is a little bit finicky. Disabling it, you'll want to disable it a lot. And so to enable and disable, just Shift Alt AA.
Search the store.
All right, so you can kind of hear it in the background right now.
Chromevox is now inactive.
All right, inactive. So I want to turn it on, and you probably can't hear it too well because it's just going through my speakers at the moment. But if I turn it on,
show notes, show notes, show notes, checkbox checked.
So it just said checkbox checked, show notes.
Show notes, checkbox not checked.
Great. Awesome, awesome stuff. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that. You learned something new. Let me know if this is something that you've integrated yourself. Let me know if there's other options, better examples perhaps. Let me know in the comments. As always, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys real soon. Goodbye.